The second bill we're considering is, I think, a deceptively simple communications bill. It says only that the FCC may not regulate rates. But as many experts have pointed out, the term rate regulation could mean anything. While the Republicans claim they intend the bill to be narrow, we have heard over and over that the draft could swallow vast sections of the Communications Act. Most notably, as written, the bill could undermine the FCC's ability to protect consumers. Democrats have repeatedly offered to help improve this bill, and I continue to be willing to work on a bill that prevents the FCC from setting rates. But I have also said that I can't allow the bill to undermine the FCC's core mission. For instance, I can't support a bill that prevents the agency from acting in the public interest. I can't support a bill that prevents the agency from protecting consumers from discriminatory practices. And I can't support a bill that undercuts the FCC's net neutrality rules. If Republicans are truly serious about passing a narrow bill, accomplishing these goals should not be hard. Our collective interests should be aligned. Unfortunately, previous attempts at compromise have failed so far. I therefore encourage my colleagues to support amendments offered by Ranking Members Eshoo and Congresswoman Matsui. Together, these amendments can accomplish many of the Republicans' goals without the same risk to consumers, and I believe these amendments offer a fair compromise, but without those changes, I can't support the underlying legislation. Instead of being partisan, I urge my Republican colleagues to work with us to find a solution that's equitable to everyone, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I'm strongly opposed to the FCC setting rates on the Internet broadband access. Government intrusion into what much services should cost, particularly when there's a competitive and growing marketplace for broadband access, is not only unnecessary but harmful to consumers and innovation. That's why I'm disappointed at the failure to find agreement on no rate regulation of Broadband Internet Access Act. There is a bipartisan support for rate regulation legislation that would promote innovation in broadband deployment and ensure our country continues to be the world leader in digital economy. I'm hopeful that an agreement may be found before tomorrow morning that I can support. This issue is too important to fail over partisan bickering, and I thank you, and I yield back my time.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for holding the markup and more specifically for going through regular order on H.R. 2666. Legislation I introduced to ensure a more stable and effective regulatory environment for broadband customers across this country. You know, over a year ago, we were able to start this process by holding hearings in our committee with Chairman Wheeler, as well as with members from the stakeholder community to gain a better understanding about the implementation of the regulatory regime that was placed upon us through the open Internet order, as well as the potential impact of those regulations on businesses and consumers. Since that time, our committee has been working diligently on completing the background work necessary to bring the no-rate regulation of broadband bill before us today. It's straightforward, and it's a narrowly tailored piece of legislation in which, in a way of ensuring through statute, that the FCC will not be in the business of regulating the Internet rates of private industry through tariffs or enforcement actions. Although Chairman Wheeler has given our committee his word that he will not use this new authority to regulate rates, his word does not bind any future chairman to that same oath, which is why we feel there is a need to move quickly to enshrine this commitment into statute. It was for this reason I proposed the text of H.R. 2666 to the chairman during one of our oversight hearings. The text in question were straightforward. Would you, Mr. Wheeler, support legislation that stated, quote, notwithstanding any other provision of the law, the FCC may not regulate the rates charged for broadband Internet access service. In front of this very committee, the chairman agreed with that language. Not only that, but then Chairman Wheeler was asked the same question by my colleague on the other side of the Capitol. In that hearing, Senator Bozeman posed the same question to the chairman, and once again, Chairman Wheeler reiterated his support for the premise of this legislation. In our hearings since that time, a number of valid questions have been brought forward expressing concerns that the wording of this bill may impact some additional areas of the regulatory environment. It was not my intention to bring into the conversation many or frankly any of those issues, which is why I'm still open to making changes to the legislation to ensure we keep the purpose and intent of this bill intact. As we progress through this markup, it's my hope that all of my colleagues on this committee will be able to vote not only for the amendments we'll be offering to tailor this legislation, but ultimately to support its final passage as it heads to the floor of the House. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would ask everyone on the committee to support the effort, and I'll yield back.
So I do have major concerns with both of the bills that we're marking up. H.R. 2666, as its name states, aims for quote, no rate regulation of broadband internet access, unquote. Unfortunately, the bill is, as introduced, is overbroad and could go much further than that. It sounded to me like my colleague from Illinois, Mr. Kinsinger, was saying that it was not his intention to go much further, and so there may be amendments that we could support. But I do urge my colleagues to make sure that the bill is narrow and focused enough to best serve consumers.